Nobody tells you this when you're young, but one of the most dangerous moments in life is realizing that the people you expected to support you were never really coming. That realization crushes some people and transforms others into something almost unstoppable. Society trains people to believe success is built through approval, connections, and endless support systems. But what if that belief is exactly what keeps most people weak? What if the constant search for validation is silently destroying ambition before it even has a chance to grow? Machiavelli understood something centuries ago that still makes people uncomfortable today. Dependence creates vulnerability. The more your future depends on other people's permission, loyalty, or approval, the less control you truly have over your own destiny. And honestly, deep down, most people already feel this. They feel trapped waiting for motivation, recognition, opportunities, or emotional support that never fully arrives. Meanwhile, the rare individuals who embrace self-reliance start operating by a completely different set of rules. They stop waiting and start building. This is where the real transformation begins. Because winning alone isn't about becoming cold, bitter, or antisocial. It's about developing the kind of internal discipline that allows someone to move forward even when nobody claps, nobody believes, and nobody understands the vision yet. Psychology shows that the human mind becomes strongest when it learns to function without constant external reassurance. That's why isolation, when used correctly, can become an advantage instead of a punishment. Strange, right? The very thing most people fear might actually be the weapon they need most. And here's the paradox nobody talks about openly. The moment you stop desperately seeking support is often the moment your power begins to grow. Your focus sharpens, your emotions stabilize, your actions become cleaner because they're no longer designed to impress anyone. Obsession replaces hesitation. Sovereignty replaces dependency. You stop living like a person waiting to be chosen and start moving like someone building an empire quietly behind closed doors. In this video, you're going to understand why some people become mentally unbreakable after abandonment, how isolation can accelerate growth faster than comfort ever could, and why the ability to stand alone may be one of the rarest forms of power in modern life. Because sometimes, the greatest advantage a person can have is discovering they never needed permission in the first place. There comes a moment in a person's life that hits harder than failure itself. It's the silent realization that nobody is coming to rescue them. No mentor magically appears, no perfect opportunity knocks on the door, and no friend can carry the weight of their ambitions forever. Most people panic at that truth. They feel abandoned, almost betrayed by the world they trusted. But a rare few experience something different. Instead of collapsing, they awaken. In the strange language of psychology, that painful moment becomes a kind of rebirth, disguised as disappointment. He starts noticing how society quietly trained him to wait for permission, wait for motivation, wait for support, wait for validation. School teaches dependence on approval. Jobs teach dependence on systems, and even relationships sometimes create emotional chains disguised as comfort. Funny enough, people call it security while slowly giving away their sovereignty, piece by piece. Machiavelli once hinted that dependence is the easiest door through which control enters a person's life. And honestly, most people never even notice the lock being installed. They just wake up one day exhausted, confused about why they no longer recognize themselves. The individual who chooses self-reliance begins thinking differently almost overnight. Instead of asking, "Who's going to help me?" he starts asking, "What can I build with what I already have?" That tiny shift changes everything. A guy with an old laptop in a cramped apartment can outwork a talented team simply because he stopped wasting energy complaining. A woman rejected by every company can build her own business because rejection forced her into discipline. Pain has a weird way of introducing people to abilities they never knew existed. And yeah, life has a dark sense of humor sometimes. Isolation also starts feeling different once he accepts this reality. At first, it feels cold, almost unfair. Weekends become quieter, conversations become fewer, and people slowly disappear when they realize he's serious about changing his life. But somewhere in that silence, clarity appears. No noise, no endless opinions, no emotional distractions, draining his focus. The same isolation that destroys one person becomes fuel for another. That's where obsession quietly begins to grow, almost unnoticed, like a fire hidden behind a wall. One of the hardest parts is realizing that victimhood can become addictive. Some people build entire identities around being misunderstood, unlucky, or unsupported. They replay old betrayals like favorite songs. But the man pursuing true self-reliance understands something dangerous. Every excuse hands power to someone else. He may have been hurt, ignored, underestimated, or abandoned, but he refuses to let those experiences become permanent chains. In psychology, responsibility is often misunderstood as pressure, when in reality, it's freedom wearing work boots. There's also a strange transformation that happens internally. He stops announcing plans too early, stops looking for applause before action, stops explaining his vision to people committed to average thinking. The world may interpret his silence as distance, but internally, he's sharpening focus like a blade. Machiavelli would probably smirk at this stage, because quiet ambition unsettles people more than loud ambition ever could. And as this internal shift deepens, another lesson begins to emerge. One far more uncomfortable than loneliness itself. Most people grow up believing support is the foundation of success. They hear phrases like, "You can't do it alone," so many times that the idea becomes absolute truth. And sure, cooperation has its place, but there's a hidden danger nobody talks about openly. The moment a person becomes emotionally dependent on support, their decisions stop being fully theirs. Their courage weakens every time approval is absent. In psychology, dependence rarely arrives looking dangerous. It usually arrives dressed as comfort, loyalty, or just being realistic. That's how people slowly trade sovereignty for temporary reassurance. He begins noticing this pattern everywhere once his awareness sharpens. A talented artist delays posting her work because friends didn't encourage her enough. A man with a brilliant business idea never starts because nobody in his family believes in him. Another spends years networking endlessly, hoping someone important will finally discover him. Meanwhile, time keeps moving like a silent thief. Machiavelli understood something most people avoid admitting. The person who controls your opportunities eventually controls your behavior. That's why self-reliance isn't just about survival. It's about preserving freedom of action. The problem with relying too heavily on support is the invisible debt it creates. Every favor, every dependency, every emotional attachment comes with expectations attached to it. Even when nobody says it out loud, people begin shaping their dreams around keeping others comfortable. They avoid risks because they fear judgment. They soften their ambitions so nobody feels threatened. Little by little, the fire inside them gets negotiated away. And honestly, the scary part is that this process feels normal while it's happening. That's why so many people wake up years later feeling disconnected from their original purpose. A man operating from true discipline learns to build without applause. He trains himself to execute, even when nobody notices his effort. Think about someone waking up at 5 a.m. to study a skill before work, while everyone around him sleeps comfortably. No audience, no motivational speech, no cheering crowd, just repetition, isolation, and consistency. That's the kind of behavior that reshapes a person's identity over time. Obsession, when directed properly, becomes a weapon instead of a weakness. Most people only see results later, but they never witness the lonely construction phase underneath. There's another uncomfortable truth hidden here too. Support can accidentally make people soft. When someone always rescues you financially, emotionally, or mentally, your ability to adapt weakens. Pressure tolerance disappears. Creativity shrinks. A person who always has backup plans rarely develops the ruthless resourcefulness needed to dominate difficult situations. Psychology shows that human beings often grow strongest under necessity, not convenience. That's why some of the most dangerous individuals in history emerged from environments where nobody was coming to help them. Survival sharpened them in ways comfort never could. Ironically, the less he depends on external support, the more powerful his presence becomes. People sense stability in someone who doesn't desperately need validation. His words carry more weight because they aren't begging for approval. his decisions become cleaner, faster, and more fearless. Machiavelli would call this strategic independence, the ability to move without emotional permission from the crowd. And once a person truly understands that, isolation stops looking like punishment. It starts looking like an advantage most people are too afraid to embrace. Before we continue, let me tell you something important. If what you've heard so far feels uncomfortably accurate, if you're starting to realize how much power, respect, and influence are controlled long before words are even spoken, then you need to understand the silent side of human psychology. That's exactly why I created the Silent Influence Code. How to make people respect, desire, and follow you without saying a word. Inside, you'll discover the hidden psychological triggers high status men use to command attention, build attraction, and influence any interaction without begging for validation or approval. If you've ever felt ignored, underestimated, or invisible in rooms where power matters, this was written for you. The link is in the pinned comment. And trust me, once you understand these dynamics, you'll never look at social interactions the same way again. Most people fear isolation because they confuse it with failure. The moment life becomes quiet, they assume something went wrong. No invitations, fewer messages, less attention. It feels almost like disappearing. But the person developing true self-reliance begins to see isolation differently. He realizes silence removes interference. No constant opinions clouding judgment. No emotional drama stealing energy. No pressure to perform for an audience. In psychology, environments shape identity more than motivation does. And sometimes the most powerful environment for growth is the one where nobody is watching. At first, though, the transition feels brutal. Humans naturally crave connection, so the absence of support creates discomfort almost immediately. He sits alone with his thoughts longer than most people can tolerate. There are no distractions strong enough to hide insecurity anymore. That's when many quit and run back to noise. But the individual who stays in that uncomfortable space starts discovering something unexpected. Clarity. His mind becomes sharper because he finally hears his own voice instead of the crowd's voice echoing inside his head. Funny enough, silence often reveals truths that motivation never could. Isolation also creates speed. Groups move slowly because everyone wants agreement, validation, and emotional safety before acting. One person operating alone can pivot instantly. He can fail fast, learn fast, and adapt without endless discussions draining momentum. Machiavelli admired individuals who understood strategic movement because hesitation often destroys opportunity before competition even arrives. Think about a small creator building content daily, while larger teams spend months planning the perfect strategy. The lone creator improves through action, while the others remain trapped in meetings, pretending productivity is progress. There's a psychological shift that happens when someone spends enough time alone pursuing a goal. Emotional toughness increases, naturally. Rejection hurts less, because there's no constant need for approval anymore. Delays become easier to tolerate because he understands long-term construction. Even boredom becomes useful instead of unbearable. Most people don't realize how addicted they are to stimulation until they try sitting quietly for 30 minutes without touching a screen. Discipline begins where distraction loses control. And honestly, modern society makes distraction so available that focus itself has become a rare form of power. A practical example of this is painfully simple. Imagine two people trying to improve financially. One spends every evening scrolling through opinions, debating ideas, and consuming endless entertainment. The other disappears for 6 months to study sales, build a skill, and practice daily without announcing anything online. At first, the second person seems invisible, maybe even antisocial. But over time, that temporary isolation compounds into mastery. Obsession, when protected from noise, develops depth most people never reach because they keep interrupting their own growth with constant exposure to other people's expectations. The dangerous part is that once someone experiences the strength that comes from isolation, they stop fearing loneliness the same way. They begin understanding sovereignty on a deeper level. The world can reject them, misunderstand them, or ignore them, yet their direction remains intact. Psychology calls this internal stability, but in practice, it feels more like becoming unshakable, and somewhere inside that quiet transformation, another phase begins to emerge. A phase where silence stops being accidental and becomes a deliberate strategy. There's a stage in transformation that almost nobody talks about openly because, honestly, it looks boring from the outside. No announcements, no motivational quotes, no dramatic speeches about success, just silence and work. This is what some people call the ghost phase. The individual disappears emotionally from unnecessary noise and channels all attention into execution. In psychology, the human brain loves rewards before effort, which is why so many people talk about goals instead of building them. Talking creates the illusion of progress. Real discipline, however, grows quietly in the dark. He stops explaining his ambitions to people who secretly enjoy doubting him. Stops posting every move online, hoping strangers validate his direction. Stops looking for emotional permission to continue. That silence creates pressure internally, almost like steam building inside a sealed machine. And strangely enough, that pressure becomes fuel. Machiavelli understood that visible intentions attract unnecessary resistance. The less people know about your movements, the harder it becomes for them to interfere with your focus. A person in a ghost phase becomes difficult to read, and that unpredictability creates power. At first, friends and family may misunderstand the change completely. They might say he's distant, obsessed, or acting different. And to be fair, they're not entirely wrong. Obsession starts reshaping his routines, while others relax every evening. He studies, practices, builds, trains, or works in silence. While others seek entertainment, he seeks leverage. There's a subtle loneliness attached to this phase because growth often requires separating from environments that reward comfort over progress. But deep down, he knows temporary isolation is cheaper than permanent regret. That thought alone keeps him moving. A practical example appears in almost every successful person's story. The athlete who trains before sunrise while nobody notices. The entrepreneur spending years building a company before anyone respects the vision. The writer producing pages daily, long before readers exist. Most people only see the visible success later and assume luck was involved. What they never witness is the ghost phase, the months or years where consistency existed without applause. Psychology shows that delayed gratification is one of the strongest predictors of long-term achievement. Yet society keeps teaching people to crave instant recognition instead. There's also something dangerous about excessive talking that few people understand. Every time someone announces goals too early, the brain receives a small emotional reward before the work is done. It's almost like the mind gets tricked into feeling accomplished prematurely. That's why so many ambitious people stay stuck in cycles of planning, posting, and fantasizing instead of executing. The man operating through self-reliance protects his energy differently. He lets results speak because results don't require convincing. Sovereignty grows stronger when actions become louder than explanations. Over time, the ghost phase changes his entire identity. He becomes calmer, sharper, more intentional with energy and attention. Distractions lose their emotional grip because he finally understands the cost of divided focus. Obsession stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling precise, almost surgical. And somewhere during those silent months of relentless execution, another transformation begins quietly in the background. The evolution of the mind itself into something far more disciplined, controlled, and difficult to break. At some point, surviving alone stops being just a strategy and becomes a psychological transformation. The individual realizes he must become two people at once, the commander and the soldier. One side gives orders, the other obeys without negotiation. That sounds intense at first, but honestly, life already works that way for everyone. The difference is that most people let emotions become the commander instead of reason. In psychology, self-mastery begins when a person stops treating feelings like permanent truth. Emotions are signals, not rulers, and that distinction changes everything. He starts noticing how weak habits quietly controlled his behavior for years. Sleeping late, procrastinating important work, seeking comfort every time stress appeared. It all felt harmless in the moment. But over time, those tiny decisions built invisible chains. Discipline breaks those chains one painful link at a time. Machiavelli believed weakness invites control, and modern life proves that idea daily. Companies manipulate distraction, algorithms manipulate attention, and even social environments manipulate identity. A person without internal control eventually becomes controlled by external forces whether he notices it or not. Pain also begins transforming into fuel instead of paralysis. Rejection sharpens him. Betrayal teaches awareness. Failure teaches adaptation. While most people waste years trying to avoid discomfort, he learns to extract value from it. Think about someone getting rejected from a dream opportunity. One person collapses emotionally and gives up. Another studies the failure, improves skills, and returns stronger 6 months later. Same event, different psychology. Self-reliance doesn't remove pain. It teaches someone how to weaponize it. And yeah, that process can feel brutal sometimes, almost unfairly demanding. The emotional control developed during this phase becomes incredibly powerful. He no longer reacts impulsively to criticism or temporary setbacks. Silence replaces emotional chaos. Instead of arguing constantly, he observes. Instead of complaining, he adjusts strategy. Isolation contributes heavily here because solitude exposes emotional patterns clearly. A man sitting alone with his thoughts eventually discovers whether he truly controls his mind or merely follows impulses disguised as personality. That realization can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Sovereignty over life begins with sovereignty over attention, emotion, and behavior first. There is a subtle but important shift in identity too. He stops viewing himself as fragile, not arrogant, not emotionless, just resilient. Modern culture sometimes treats resilience like coldness, but there's a huge difference between being numb and being stable. A stable person can feel fear, frustration, or sadness without surrendering direction. Obsession becomes structured rather than reckless. Discipline becomes automatic instead of forced. Even simple routines, waking up early, exercising, controlling distractions, start building internal trust. And trust in oneself is dangerous power because it eliminates hesitation during difficult moments. Eventually, people begin sensing the transformation before he even speaks. There's calmness in the way he moves, patience in the way he responds, certainty in the way he makes decisions. He no longer needs constant reassurance because he already survived situations that forced growth from the inside out. Machiavelli would probably describe this as quiet authority, the kind built through hardship instead of status. And once someone reaches that level of internal control, success itself starts becoming less about survival and more about ownership. One of the strangest things about success is that support often appears only after the struggle is over. The same people who doubted him suddenly admired the results. Opportunities begin arriving from places that once ignored him completely. Invitations, partnerships, praise, it all shows up late, almost like the world waits to see proof before offering respect. And honestly, that realization changes the way he views human nature forever. Machiavelli understood this deeply. People are usually loyal to strength, not potential. That truth may sound harsh, but psychology confirms it more often than most want to admit. Because he built everything through self-reliance, his relationship with success feels different. There's no resentment about sharing credit because he knows exactly who carried the weight during the lonely years. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of isolation belongs fully to him. That creates a level of confidence external validation can't replicate. He no longer needs applause to feel valuable because his identity was forged privately long before anyone noticed results. Sovereignty becomes more than independence. At this stage, it becomes ownership of one's mind, time, direction, and future. Ironically, success also makes him more selective about who enters his life. Earlier versions of himself accepted almost any support out of desperation. Now he understands that not all support is beneficial. Some people bring distraction, disguised as friendship. Others bring dependence disguised as love. Discipline teaches him to protect his peace the same way a king protects territory. That doesn't mean becoming cold or arrogant. It simply means understanding that energy, focus, and emotional stability are resources too valuable to hand out carelessly. And once someone learns that lesson, relationships become intentional instead of impulsive. There's also a powerful shift in how he helps others. Because he understands struggle personally, he can recognize real effort versus empty excuses almost immediately. He respects people willing to endure discomfort for growth. Obsession no longer scares him because he knows mastery demands intensity. Sometimes he offers guidance, opportunities, or strategic support, but never in ways that create dependency. Real empowerment strengthens another person's ability to stand alone, eventually. Psychology shows that rescuing people repeatedly can weaken them long-term, even when intentions are good. That's a hard lesson many never fully understand. A practical example of this mindset appears in successful mentors who teach skills instead of creating emotional reliance. Instead of constantly saving someone financially, they teach leverage, discipline, and decision-making. Instead of motivating endlessly, they encourage personal responsibility. The goal becomes building capable individuals, not permanent followers. Machiavelli admired leaders who created strength around them because fragile systems collapse under pressure eventually. The same principle applies to life itself. A person dependent on constant reassurance will struggle whenever uncertainty appears. But someone who builds inner stability carries power everywhere they go. In the end, the greatest reward isn't money, status, or recognition. It's freedom. The freedom to move without fear, decide without permission, and live without emotional chains controlling every choice. Self-reliance gave him that. Isolation sharpened it. Discipline protected it. Obsession fueled it. And sovereignty became the final result of surviving the journey alone. Most people spend life searching for external rescue, never realizing the strongest version of themselves was waiting to emerge the moment they stopped expecting to be saved. Now, the question becomes unavoidable. How much of your life has been controlled by the need for approval, support, or permission? Really think about that for a second. How many opportunities were delayed because someone didn't believe in you? How many dreams stayed trapped inside your head because fear, comfort, or dependence quietly convinced you to wait a little longer? Most people spend years searching for external rescue without realizing their greatest power begins the moment they stop expecting to be saved. The truth is, self-reliance is not about becoming isolated from the world forever. It's about becoming strong enough that your direction no longer collapses when support disappears. It's about building discipline when motivation fades, maintaining focus when distractions multiply, and protecting your sovereignty in a world constantly trying to influence your mind, your time, and your identity. That transformation doesn't happen overnight, but every small decision matters. Every silent sacrifice matters. Every moment you choose growth over comfort changes who you are becoming. And honestly, this is where most people fail. Not because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they never develop the psychological strength to continue alone when life becomes uncomfortable. Obsession scares average people because average people worship balance more than purpose. But the individuals who change their lives understand something different. Temporary isolation is often the price of long-term freedom. And once you experience that freedom, it becomes almost impossible to return to living emotionally dependent on the crowd. So now ask yourself honestly, are you building a life based on approval or based on purpose? Are you waiting for validation before acting? Or are you learning to trust your own execution? What would happen if you stopped announcing your plans and started moving in silence for the next 6 months? How different could your life look if you fully committed to discipline instead of excuses? Those questions matter more than motivation ever will. If this message connected with you, take it seriously. Don't just watch this video and move on like nothing happened. Apply it, test it, build something quietly. Train your mind to operate without constant reassurance. Because the world respects results far more than intentions. And deep down, you already know that's true. And now I want to hear from you. What's the biggest thing holding you back from becoming fully independent mentally, emotionally, or financially? Drop your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate notifications so you can continue learning more about psychology, discipline, self-reliance, and the strategies that help ordinary people become impossible to control.